Welcome and good morning on yet another Monday here from the CNET New York Studios. It's time for the 359 CNET's daily live news talk show where you get to submit your questions and comments about today's topics. And your host for episode 534 on Monday, March 18th, 535, I stand corrected. Here's Ben and Roger.
Yay!
Good morning.
OGs.
Happy Monday. Woohoo! Let me just adjust this mic here so I don't sound weird. We've got lots of goodness for you. We're going to talk about Apple's new iPads, which came out kind of quietly this morning. You know, a little press release, no big fanfare, no hoopla. We'll talk about Ben's big facial recognition investigative piece, which is the kickoff to our big facial recognition special report that's going to be running for the next couple of weeks. And lastly, we'll talk about GDC at the Game Developers Conference going on in SF, well, in a few hours. An hour? Pretty soon. Anyway, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Brian will pick out the best, and we'll get to them in 3 minutes and 59 seconds.
Stick around, folks. We'll see you back in the chat. Looking forward to seeing what you think about the new iPads in 3 minutes and 59 seconds from 3, 2...
Welcome to the 359. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Ben Fox-Rubin.
Apple has a big event slated for next Monday, but this morning quietly announced 2 new iPads, a refreshed and a larger 10.5 iPad Air. The iPad Air will start at $499, while the new iPad Mini starts at $399.
And they're discontinuing the 10.5-inch iPad Pro. So this kind of, the new iPad Air basically replaces that one, right?
This is the confusing thing. They haven't brought out a new iPad Air for 2 years. And now that they have, it essentially works to replace the iPad Pro. It's larger. It's the 10.5-inch one. It works with the Apple Pencil. So it basically is the iPad Pro in all but name.
So we were talking about this just ahead of the podcast, that it's kind of like they're taking the Air name and making it more like the Pro. They just did that with the MacBook Air. The MacBook Air is almost indistinguishable from the MacBook Pro. The specs are almost identical. Do you think there's any reason for that?
It's weird. We were talking about this earlier. The iPad lineup has gotten a lot like the Mac lineup in that it's kind of confusing. There's a bit of overlap here and there, and it's getting harder to figure out which is the iPad you want. I mean, essentially, I guess this is supposed to be a work level type iPad since it's got keyboard accessory, it's got the Apple Pencil compatibility. I mean, look, these things have never really been that great for the workplace, but
definitely
they're definitely trying to present the Air as the new Pro.
So from a financial perspective, I was just pulling up the numbers. It looks like the iPad business line had actually done better in the December quarter. So we'd been seeing it gone down for quarter after quarter after quarter. Obviously, they figured out a way to at least inject a little bit more life into the iPads, but it's still like they just sent out a press release.
Right.
So obviously their posture at Apple is we're not going to treat this as a big thing.
And I know they've done well in getting these things in schools, and that's, I think, what has helped reverse some of the declines in sales. Also, the fact that they're releasing the hardware here via press release is sort of a tacit acknowledgement that next week's event will likely be mostly content-focused. We're probably not going to see any hardware.
Yeah, good point.
All right, so next up, let's talk about facial recognition. CNET has kicked off its latest special report dedicated to this topic. Ben, you had sort of the lead story today in this exhaustive investigative piece.
Oh,
tell me what you found.
So facial recognition used by law enforcement has largely been promoted as a way to solve cold cases or find missing children or reduce human trafficking.
Really, these big, controversial,
these like some
attention-gathering crimes, right?
But I went and I got police reports from one of Amazon's only known law enforcement agencies that uses their facial recognition, and largely they were using it for petty crimes. Very minor crimes like theft of a bicycle, $12 shoplifting case, which the ACLU, I talked to them about this finding, and they said, look, this shows that this type of technology is completely unnecessary. Why would you create this huge facial recognition database just to solve a $12 shoplifting case?
Right. Well, look, it's a fascinating story, and it basically, and I think it is a great illustration of this balance between the need to use facial recognition to solve crimes and like the fear of overreach, right?
Yeah.
This is where we're going. This is sort of the nation state where we're just going to be using facial recognition everywhere.
Well, and that's the concern of the ACLU, that
Yep.
it's just going to be a slippery slope. But in the defense of the Washington County Sheriff's Office, which is the one using this tool, they say that it really speeds up their investigations. Even for these minor investigations, it can sometimes take days to identify somebody's face.
Right.
This, you just plug it into the tool. If it's one of the mugshots that they have in their database, it comes back almost instantly.
All right, well, I mean, we've got a lot more facial recognition stories, exploring both the pluses and minuses. There are some good things about it, for sure, but stay tuned to CNET for the rest of the stories. Lastly, we want to give a shout-out to Ian Scher and Scott Stein, who are on the ground at the Game Developer Conference in San Francisco. We expect the big news we expect is Google potentially announcing this game streaming service tomorrow.
Ooh. Like a Twitch?
Not like a Twitch, no, more like a cloud gaming service. Basically, the idea that you can use low-powered hardware to play whatever games, whether it's the latest AAA title for like Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption, right? So we'll see. I mean, that's sort of the big thing. Game streaming has started to take off a bit. It's still kind of niche, but with Google kind of putting their resources behind it, it could be more of a mainstream thing. At least until Google makes its announcement, Laura Grunin has a nice wrap-up of the services that are actually out there now.
Nice.
So for more on GDC, facial recognition, and all else tech, check us out on CNET. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Ben Fox-Rubin.
Thanks for listening.
And thanks everybody for joining us for the recording of the audio podcast. You can subscribe using the links down below in the description. Now, as always, go ahead and feel free to send in your questions and comments about the topics at hand. Already got a bunch flowing in, so let's go ahead and take one from Carlos. Do we have any information on iOS 13?
We do
That's
not.
later.
That's later. That's WWDC. Well, that's May.
June?
So
Is it May or June? Whatever. It's in a couple months.
May or June. Not now, basically. Yeah. It's a little early for that. These are not, these devices are not going to be running on that version of iOS yet.
And do not expect iOS 13 news, or not a lot of iOS 13 news for the event next week.
Yeah.
That's going to be, when we said it's mostly like content related, it's expected to be Apple's new TV service, which
Right.
Joan was on the podcast a few times to talk about that. And also their news service,
Yep.
which is basically like bundling magazine subscriptions together. So we'll see if there are any other surprises in addition to that.
Yeah.
Next up, let's take one from our old friend Timothy. He says, do you know why the new iPads didn't have a USB-C adapter? I would like to have one cable to rule them all.
I know, it's
Yeah.
kind of confusing. It didn't seem like they did a lot to redesign these devices. I mean, they look like they use the former shell, the iPad mini, and I guess in the iPad Air case, like the older iPad Pro, because they still have headphone jacks, they still have Lightning ports. I don't think Apple did a lot of work to redesign the internal guts of this thing, which probably is why they just announced this via press release. These aren't significant changes to the design of the hardware. I mean, that's why you see the Lightning port. And I agree, it's kind of confusing when you got I've got multiple devices, so I've got to have a Lightning port, a USB-C port, and for some cases, micro USB for some of the older devices I have. So
yeah, it is kind of nice. I have an Android phone. I have an S8.
Yep.
So if I'm and I charge it when I go to bed at night. So
Right.
if I'm like hanging out on my bed and I've got my MacBook Air, the new MacBook Air, you could just plug it into the Android charger.
Yeah.
Which is nice, definitely. But it's a great question from I think that was Timothy, right?
Yep.
And I think if you're a conspiracy theorist, you would look at the iPad switch over as a clue to find out if the iPhone is ever going to switch over to USB-C.
Well,
because
I mean,
they would
look,
do that one first.
They've done the iPad Pro. The larger
didn't
iPad
know
Pro
that.
uses a USB-C port, and that's why it's kind of confusing why these haven't adopted yet. That was last year's high-end model. That was it. And so these, like I said, I don't think Apple put a lot of work into redesigning the internal parts, and that's why these ports are all the same.
So, like the iPad lineup, some of them are USB-C,
One
and
of
some
them-
of them.
one of
One
them-
is USB-C, the top end one,
Yeah.
which is the closest to a laptop,
Yep.
basically.
Yep.
And then the rest of them are Lightning. Yeah, that is.
But you
kinda
would think the
confusing.
iPad Air would have embraced USB-C too, but like the older iPad Pro, this one has a home button. It has the thicker bezel. It doesn't have the new redesign of the. Oh, actually, it does. Sorry, I'm looking. Sorry, I'm looking at the iPad Mini photos. You're right. It does have the slimmer bezel. But
Right. I see. You're
sorry,
looking at the
I
Mini.
am looking at the iPad Mini. Sorry, but anyways, it's confusing.
Yeah.
I really just like.
That's definitely a good point.
Next one comes in from Joseph Gauss. Do you think that there is still a market for tablets like the iPad, especially how we use the new iPads, how the new iPads were announced with very little hype? You think that's any writing on the wall for the market?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they've done this before. By the way, they have announced new iPads via press release before. I think they did one not last year, but the year it might have been last year actually. They did have that iPad education event, but they really had to like work hard to justify having that event. Like they made it more of an experiential thing. It was less about the hardware and more about like what you can do with it, the new ways you can use it for the education background. And so that was kind of like the last hurrah in terms of like the mainstream type iPad announcements. But I don't know. It's the market is still there. I mean, they still generate billions of dollars of revenue on iPads. It's not a growing business for sure. It's definitely a lot more mature. People have iPads now. Almost everyone has an iPad or a tablet of some sort, and it's not something you need to replace every 2 or 3 years. So I think that's kind of why the enthusiasm has waned in this market.
I think they've definitely found an opportunity to grow the revenue on the iPad side.
Yep.
Granted, they stopped reporting the actual physical unit numbers, the number of units that they sell every quarter, but they've increased the prices.
Yep.
You know, and that's really been able to help them improve revenue. So, but we don't know how they're selling otherwise because they won't give us the unit numbers.
Yep.
Anime Fan 896. Do you think Apple will make the Do you think Apple will make phones with 6.9-inch screens again?
What is the current lineup?
Actually, I don't. What is the max? I don't even know what the max
I gotta
one
go
is.
look that up. Is 6.9-inch small again? I don't even know.
Oh, you talking about? Wait, are you talking about the? Is he talking about the iPad Mini or the iPhone?
He's asking about phones with 6.9-inch screens.
All right,
That's all he's got.
Well, the iPad Mini is 7.9, so 6.9 would be pretty massive. I don't know. Phones do seem to keep getting bigger and bigger, so I wouldn't put it past.
So the 10S Max is 6.5 inches.
All right, so it's kind of getting there.
So he's looking for a much bigger phone.
Well, no, 6.4 to 6.9 isn't a huge leap.
So
I mean, I guess it is diagonal. It's larger.
The way Apple had been able to get bigger displays into very similar structures is they get rid of the bezel. So
right.
But I don't think that there's any more bezel room to actually do that.
There's a bit, but it's not significant. Like they'd have to make the phone physically bigger, and the iPhone XS Max is massive. I mean, it's like the Plus, and I've been using a Plus recently, and just with the case, it just kind of reminded me how like massive this phone is, and I'm not really a big fan of that.
Yeah, so I wouldn't anticipate a 6.9-inch iPhone quite yet.
Well, definitely not this year. We're expecting very few design changes for the lineup this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Sorry.
As a follow-up from Ryan, going off Joseph's question, did the big phones, the phablets as it were, hurt the tablet market?
Yes, absolutely. I think the fact that these, what was a 6.4-inch iPhone XS Max.
Yeah, I think it's 6.5 even.
The Note, I think, is even bigger. So it's, it kind of replaces the need for that tablet, especially if you had one of the smaller tablets, like a Mini or one of the old Galaxy S Tabs, one of the smaller ones. Like, yeah, you don't necessarily need that since, your iPhone kind of gets you, or these bigger phones get you like 70% of the way there.
Yeah, and the Note even has a stylus,
right?
Which
right.
I'm a little surprised Apple decided they still don't want to provide a stylus even for like the really, really big phone, but whatever.
Pencil compatibility with their...
That pencil will not fit inside the phone similarly, but either way, it's absolutely, I would think, hurt tablet sales. But at the same time, if you're Apple and people are buying the XS Max...
Yeah.
what do you care? Like it's you buy the 10s Max, it's way more money than you would be spending on an iPad Mini anyway.
Right.
So as long as you're an Apple customer, I think they're happy to sell you this
In
stuff.
that respect, I am a little surprised they even refreshed the iPad Mini, given that like it's probably like the least profitable of their products at this point. It's what, $399. I'm sure they can make this extremely cheap at this point, and they've got decent margins on it. But it's probably not what the margins are for selling a iPhone XS Max, which again physically gets you close to there, right? I mean, that said, the folks who probably want to buy an iPad Mini may not necessarily be the ones who buy the super high-end iPhone either.
Okay, so by the way, what are we expecting for the new iPhones this year?
I mean, the rumors point to essentially the same designs as last year, but like 3 cameras and, you know, faster processor, more of a minor spec bump than like a full redesign.
And we still have no idea what they're going to call it.
iPhone 11 maybe?
Yeah, but like they're still going to do Roman numerals?
XI?
Okay. We'll find
XIS?
out. That'll be the most
know.
interesting part of the whole thing.
What do we call these things? Or we'll just call it the iPhone.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's probably not going to happen. But
All right, here's an easy one to get out of the way. Everybody's asking about the AirPod 2.
Oh, great
we
question.
don't know.
No,
we
it's
don't
not.
know.
That's a terrible
I
question.
thought they'd be here by now.
Here's the question, though. Okay, everybody's been talking about these AirPod 2s, and the rumors have been percolating for long enough that we know they exist. Obviously, they exist.
Do we?
Apple probably has them in some back office, whatever, you know.
They're in Tim Cook's desk.
Right.
The
but
one set.
Here's the thing, though. Like, what improvements are people specifically looking for?
Wireless charging.
That's it.
I think that's it.
They want wireless
there's
charging.
supposed to be a new design, but I think mostly, and probably some audio improvements, but I think putting wireless charging into the case, so having the case kind of sit on a wireless charging pad, I think it was the biggest improvement. And I think everyone has just sort of been... AirPods have... Look, they're a huge success at this point. I thought they looked dumb initially, but like even I want a pair. And I think a lot of folks are probably sitting in the same situation that I am, where like I kind of want to buy AirPods, but I also don't want to buy last year's Like I'm waiting for that new one to come out. And so I think that's why there's some anticipation for it.
I don't think they're going to change the design that much.
I don't think so.
The AirPods have kind of become a look.
Right.
People really recognize them and see them. Maybe they would shorten the little Q-tip.
But I think it's like the principle of the matter. It's sort of like I don't want to buy last year's version if the new one is coming out.
Look, I totally get that. The AirPods were first introduced how long ago? It's been a couple of years, honestly. So it makes perfect sense that people would be looking for the second version.
The slightly improved version.
The slightly improved version with maybe like Bluetooth
and
100.
And we've seen the reports. We've seen a lot of rumors of this thing coming out. And it's weird. It hasn't come out yet. I kind of thought they might be bundled into the announcement this morning, but nothing.
No, I think they've realized that they're building anticipation at this point. So my guess, if I were a betting man, which I am, is going to be at WWDC.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's going to be like this developer conference. They're going to be talking about a bunch of wonky stuff. And then just to get everybody excited in the room.
They're like, boom, AirPods.
Check it out. Otherwise, I would say expect it in September because from what you just said, there's not going to be that much really hot news on the iPhone side. So
maybe we might actually even see that mythical AirPower charging pad.
They're just, no. Come on. You know that's never going to happen.
And I'm Bigfoot.
Yeah.
But AirPods 2, I feel very confident that they are going to come out at some point.
Oh, yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
Don't make me a liar, Tim Apple. Come on. Come on, Tim.
Well done, Ben CNET. All right, so
Moving on.
What's next?
Well, I mean, as far as the AirPods go, people want them in black. I think they're going to have to refresh that design a little bit.
That's so
just
easy to
for the
do.
sake
Yeah.
of status,
even if
though.
it's just colors.
Yeah, for serious.
You know that's like the first thing that they're going to do.
Yeah.
But actually, you know what? I take that back. You don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
So usually with the cheaper stuff, the stuff that's like more affordable, they usually put those in colors.
Yes.
I don't know why, but that's their move.
AirPod Reds.
Yeah.
Red product ones, you know.
These are good ideas.
Yeah.
Keep selling
From
them.
Reinhard, what do you think is the aim for cheap iPads? Is it to replace the iPhone and introducing people to the Apple ecosystem?
I think the second point is pretty fair. I think introducing people to the ecosystem, it's probably a good one. It's a good like secondary tablet for your kid, especially if you're in the iOS. I know. I mean,
It's $400.
Yeah, I mean, for if you're, you're well off. You know,
If you're
you put a
bribing
really
people,
thick case.
you're bribing people to get your kid into Stanford. Yes, absolutely.
I don't think it's that extreme. I've got relatives who've got iPad minis for their kids.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
like
No, I
13,
agree with
14-year-old kids, you know, like you don't necessarily, I mean, maybe they have their phones already, but
I have younger kids, so the $50 like app,
Kindle Fire,
Amazon, whatever, the Fire, that one, like, and if they accidentally throw it out of the car, like you don't even care. It's not a problem.
Well,
So-
I mean, the thing is, if you're in that iOS ecosystem, like personally with your phone, your laptop, whatever, and you want to kind of stay in that, like, I guess this is the cheapest option. It is still pricey though. I mean, like I think the original iPad Mini was a little bit less expensive.
I don't remember.
I don't even remember.
I don't know. There are a lot of specifics.
Well, just in
this
terms of like getting
episode.
like a refurbished iPad Mini, like I felt like that was like a good way to go if you wanted to get like a small secondary tablet for your family.
It's true. $400 for an Apple product is cheap, but not like it really depends what you're using it for. So yeah, I agree with you. Like it's staying within the Apple ecosystem or introducing people to the Apple ecosystem. Those definitely make sense for what this could be used for.
Oh,
and
sorry,
also
wait.
for schools.
Actually, so sorry, the price of this is $399, right? But the iPad, the actual iPad, just the iPad, is $329.
Yeah, because that one's
That's
the
the
one
one-
that's being promoted for schools, I believe.
So the iPad Mini is more expensive than the iPad. I just realized that, and that
This
kind of
is-
pisses me off.
It's really confusing. The Apple portfolio has become incredibly confusing.
This is why it's a complete mess. Yes.
It's not our fault.
Yeah.
We did our homework.
I'm sorry.
All right, we're gonna pivot into facial recognition. Alex,
Thank you. We were really hoping to talk about facial recognition the whole time.
Hey.
you put Apple in the headline.
I know.
And you know that crowd just comes a knocking. Thank you, by the way. We're glad to have you.
We are
We are.
very happy to
We
have
are.
you.
All right, from Alex. Assuming you believe facial recognition software will become a norm, isn't it better for your software, specifically citing Google and Amazon, to be used and make money than someone else? Terrorist attacks are pushing this. I don't know where he's coming from on that one, but I think his general concept is, wouldn't it be better to develop in-house rather than partner out?
Is the question specifically if you're Google or Amazon?
Those are the two names he did cite by name in his question.
I mean, obviously, okay, so first of all, Microsoft and Google have intentionally avoided selling their facial recognition platforms to law enforcement. They've very expressly said there's not enough legislation around facial recognition, which, like, my story very clearly shows that this sheriff's office could use facial recognition for any case that they decide that they want to use it for. Microsoft and Google have decided, like, look, we're going to develop facial recognition for a number of things, but we're not going to give it to law enforcement. Amazon has obviously decided to take a very different tact on that. I think people will fall on either side. Jeff Bezos has come out. He was specifically talking about the Department of Defense, but he was saying, like, look, we want to make sure that our military has all the best tools at their disposal because, you know, and this was, I think, in response to, like, a lot of Google employees complaining about how Google was getting into military contracts. But I think his posture as it relates to that is directly relatable to Amazon deciding they want to share facial recognition, not only with the Washington County Sheriff's Office, but also with Orlando PD. There are a bunch of other facial recognition platforms. Like the FBI uses a facial recognition platform. I don't actually know what they're using for.
And in terms of sort of the idea of developing in-house versus partnering, if you're a company like Google or Amazon where you've got tons of resources, yes, it makes more sense to develop that stuff in-house. You have more control over it. You can integrate it better into your various systems. And it does take a lot of resources to do this. I've seen, handset makers, I won't say which ones, to introduce facial recognition and AI into their cameras, for instance, in terms of like image recognition, to basically let the camera know this is an apple and you should shoot the apple in a certain way. And I've seen how often they can misfire. Especially since, they fed in, what they do is they feed images into a database to train the system to understand what this is an apple and this is not an apple. But oftentimes these companies are doing this, they're rushed or they're trying to make a product release cycle. and the systems don't work.
Or it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's the point. Like because they're rushing, because they can't put in the database of 1 million images. They put in like 100,000. There is a significant drop off in the quality of that recognition system.
So a good example that I think is often referenced as it relates to facial recognition with law enforcement was like the Boston Marathon bombing. So I think it was one person was there. It may have been both brothers, but I know at least one brother was there to set off a bomb. The argument is if we had facial recognition on these security cameras targeting, we would be able to quickly identify potential terrorists in the audience or, at the marathon and prevent this horrible tragedy from even happening in the first place. The thing is how are you actually going to know who you're looking for?
Yeah.
There has to be a ton of police work that's done ahead of time to actually identify potential suspects, or you're identifying people that you already have mugshots for. That means that they were arrested.
Right.
They were arrested for certain prior events. But otherwise, I mean, like I saw this from my own investigation that if somebody had done something illegal and they had never been previously picked up for anything, they're not in your database.
Right.
So like you plug it into the facial recognition tool, you don't get anything back. So again, going back to the ACLU, their argument is you shouldn't be creating this database in the first place. It doesn't even help you for certain instances.
There you go.
From Harvey, in your opinion, which would be better for security purposes? Do you think retina scan is safer or facial recognition is better and safer?
I don't know. That's a really good specific question.
So it depends on the technology being used for facial recognition. I'm assuming he's talking about on mobile devices because Samsung has touted retina scan as a more secure way to authenticate someone than facial recognition. I think generally that's true if you're comparing it to the facial recognition systems that are found on your Android devices that use 2D images and are not quite as secure. They can be fooled. I think it's arguable about if you compare it to Apple's Face ID system, which uses infrared and uses a 3D model and like hundreds of thousands of dots. Which theoretically could be more accurate than a retina scan. I'm not actually sure which is more secure, but I know they're both more secure than your kind of baseline facial recognition system that you would find for a standard Android phone.
Yeah, I know for my S8, I turned on retinal scan for like 5 seconds.
It takes longer, right?
It takes, you also have to like set it up in the right way, whereas with Face ID, it's also a lot quicker. It just... Right. So there is also, not only from a security perspective, but you unlock your phone a lot throughout the day. So you really have to look at it from just like a value perspective of like convenience, that like how much do I really want to deal with this? So
I want to say that I went back to using my iPhone 7 Plus and the Touch ID sensor, and it's just kind of amazing how I've forgotten how much faster it is than Face ID.
Touch ID is faster than Face ID.
Well, if you think about it, when I pull my phone up, I have my finger on the fingerprint sensor. Before I even get it up to my face, it's already unlocked and ready to go. Whereas Face ID, you do kind of still have to do one of these things.
Yeah.
And, it's decent, but it's not as fast as Touch ID is.
Yeah, you heard it here first, Apple.
Bring it back.
Get Touch ID inside the display. Catch up to
Samsung's
Samsung.
done it, although, at least according to Jessica Dolcourt, it's not the best experience either.
Can't say I'm not that
ultrasound fingerprint sensor is a little bit less reliable than Qualcomm makes it out to be.
Yeah, first generation, that does make sense, but it is a little disappointing.
The in-display fingerprint sensor I have in my OnePlus 7 is actually pretty darn fast. It's just not, it may not necessarily be as secure.
Nice.
So there's that. There's always a trade-off. Security versus convenience.
Yeah.
Closing thought from Ryan Williams. This whole facial recognition sounds like the machine from Person of Interest. Can it stop crimes before they happen? That would be awesome.
Awesome or scary?
A little bit of both. Isn't that the world we live in?
Yeah, because how do we know if the crime that it's stopping is actually going to happen? That's Minority Report in a nutshell.
Report.
So, and as that amazing movie proved, they can be wrong about these things.
Unfortunately, yeah. Every system can be gamed in certain ways.
Right.
It's also
what were they called? Precepts? Precogs?
Precogs.
Precogs. There we go.
The precogs. There was one precog that was overpowering the other precogs.
Yeah, there's the dissenting opinion, right?
It was That's basically facial recognition in a nutshell. 3 precogs underwater That's what's making sure you get arrested. So yeah, I think it's really important to talk about this stuff before it becomes extremely prevalent, because suggesting that it did become prevalent, at least we did it with our eyes open, and like we're fully aware that this is something that we wanted to do from a safety or security perspective.
Yep.
Big difference in all this, though, is Person of Interest is actually good, whereas Minority Report sucks.
Oh,
Wait, what?
okay.
Minority Report was great, and I only watched like a handful of episodes of Person of Interest.
By default, Person of Interest has to be better.
Wait,
What?
does Person of Interest have the giant thing where you like move stuff around?
No, that's Minority Report.
No. I mean, like, that makes Person of Interest worse.
Yeah,
because that thing is awesome.
He's trying to prove his point, but forgetting that Tom Cruise. So anyways, we're out of time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. There's still great questions flooding in, but we just don't have time to cover them all. Don't worry. I'm sure there'll be plenty more episodes coming up talking about these new iPads once we get them in our hands. So thanks again for joining us. We will see you tomorrow. Roger.
Yep, 359 is available on iTunes, TuneIn, Feedburner, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, the Amazon Echo, and, of course, CNET.com. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye, folks.
Bye.